In the name of Christ, amen. Today we're going to be looking at our Old Testament reading from the book of Isaiah, chapter 11. A beautiful prophetic text pointing to the coming of the Christ child, of course, and the birth of the baby. And it's amazing that this was predicted just so long before it actually happened. But before we jump into the text, I was reminded as I was reading these words of Isaiah of the old Peanuts comic strip. I've always loved Charles Schulz and the Peanut strip and Charlie Brown. And many of you can remember the strip back in the old days when it was in actual newspapers. Some of us only really remember it from the TV specials. But regardless of whether it was the TV specials or the comic strip, most of you remember the ongoing problem with Charlie Brown and Lucy and the football. And in this, over the years, constantly, Lucy would convince Charlie Brown to try to kick a football. But when she held it for him to kick, as soon as he got his foot in motion, she'd move the ball, he would flip up in the air and land on his face. And the amusing thing about the strip was always the banter of how Lucy would convince Charlie Brown to once again try to kick the ball and promising she won't move it this time, and then also what's usually said afterward. But there's a couple things you may not know about the history of this ongoing gag in Charlie Brown. Did you know that in 1953, it all began with Charlie Brown trying to kick the football on his own? No Lucy. And he still couldn't kick it. Even on his own, he kept falling down. Later that same year in the strip, Lucy starts to try to kick a football, and over she tries to punt the ball and flubs her kicks. Can never do it. And do you know what Charlie Brown does in the comic strip? He mocks her. Charlie Brown says to Lucy, "You're hopeless. That was the worst kick I've ever seen." Lucy says, "Well, after all, I'm just a little girl, you know." Charlie Brown says, "Well, little girls don't belong on football fields. Go home." Lucy says, "I don't understand. I was the star fullback in nursery school." But interesting that it begins with Lucy missing the ball and Charlie Brown mocking her. But then starts the annual or semi-annual strip of Lucy convincing Charlie Brown to kick the ball, her holding it and yanking it away. And I've always found it so amusing the ways that she tries to convince him that even though every single time she pulls the ball back, she'll get him to do it again. Back in 1961, and it's always that there's always a little bit of symbolism in there of things maybe going on in society at the time. And in 1961, she convinces him to try it again by saying, "Charlie Brown, you can't just live in a world without trusting anyone. You have to have some trust, Charlie Brown. I promise I won't move the ball this time." And what does she do? Moves the ball. 1963. Same thing. She convinces him, "I promise I won't move the ball this time." She does. He kicks, flips in the air, lands on his face, and she tells him, "Charlie Brown, a woman's handshake is not legally binding." 1969, she begs Charlie Brown, crying, to kick the ball, that she promises that this time she'll hold it still. He tries again. She moves the ball again. He lands on his face. Lucy says, "Never listen to a woman's tears, Charlie Brown." But the best, in 1970, when she again convinces Charlie Brown to go after the ball and to kick it, she again yanks it out of the way at the last minute, so he falls on his face. She actually tells him, not a recitation, but more of an interpretation of a passage from the book of Isaiah when she says to Charlie Brown, "How long will you fail at this? All your life, Charlie Brown, all of your life." But things changed in the 1970s. There was a sequence of comic strips, which I never remembered, where Charlie Brown became very seriously ill. And when Lucy hears that Charlie Brown's return from the hospital is uncertain, she breaks down, realizes how much he means to her, and promises him that she'll let him kick the ball if he'll only get better. Then in August of 1979, upon Charlie Brown's recovery, for the first time, Lucy brings him out to the field, and after all those years, she does not yank the ball away. She fulfills her promise. However, even though she does not yank the ball, Charlie Brown misses the ball anyways, ends up kicking Lucy and breaking her arm. And as you read this and see this over the years, it gives you this idea of you just can't win. It's never going to happen. No matter who does what, it's going to go horribly wrong. Charlie Brown and Lucy and a football, not going to be good. And our Isaiah text this morning in verse 1 of chapter 11 begins with a very interesting phrase. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. This is a fascinating text because the people reading this at this time would have really been struck by that image of the stump of Jesse. Because the people of Israel, and of course, maybe some of you don't know, Jesse is the father of King David. And Jesse was the kind of the head of the lineage that brought forth Israel's most glorious times. David and the Davidic kingdom, the great warrior, Solomon, the incredible wise ruler for a while. But during the rules of David and Solomon, Israel became one of the most powerful nations in the world. It was a center of commerce. It was a military power. There was wealth. And then under Solomon, there was incredible wisdom where people would come seek the wisdom of Solomon and of God from afar. The temple was built and God literally dwelt in their midst. These were glorious, glorious times where people that were of Israel were so proud. I'm an Israelite. I mean, there was no other country, no other people that could hold a candle to the might of Israel. It was legendary. But then, after years of disobeying God, they died. They fell. They became very unimportant. And by the time of Isaiah, he is referring to them as a stump. And they probably felt that way. Just like Charlie Brown and the football, we can't win. We keep getting dragged into captivity. We try to start something up again and it doesn't work. People are constantly overrunning us. There's our race of people have been intermixed now, and it's not even really Israel anymore. It's just kind of a center path of different peoples going different ways. Certainly nothing like the people of God. There's no beautiful temple with throngs of people worshiping anymore as it was in the old days. The presence of God is greatly, greatly dimmed. It is, as Isaiah says, a stump. What began with Jesse and David and Solomon as a living, breathing, wonderful people of God is now dead. It's nothing. It's a stump. These are stump people. These are people that probably many of whom feel there's no hope, no future, can't win. And there's still the stump people now. In fact, all of us are stump people because we're all born into pretty much wretched sin. We might like to believe that there's some innocence and good, but there's not. We're sinners. We're dead human flesh, even at the day it's born, is just a matter of years away from decaying and dying. That's a stump kind of life. But not only that, even those of us that are people of faith, we've got stump parts. Every one of us here has got a part of ourselves that's a stump. Maybe it's a physical malady we just can't get rid of, and we just feel like there's no hope. What makes it worse is if it's something we could have done something about earlier and we didn't. Isn't that a horrible feeling? But maybe it's not physical. Maybe it's just something that weighs on your soul. Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's your inability to control yourself, your temper, your emotions. Maybe it's something you said and did to someone in the past that you can't take back. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's career decisions and choices that you made early on. Maybe it's relationship choices. Maybe it's things you did with your children. Whatever it might be, it's something that in your own heart and mind and soul you just look at and say, that's dead. It's nothing. I can't do anything about it. Maybe if I could go back in time, but right now it's a stump. It's a piece of me that's dead. But the wonderful good news of Isaiah as he prophesies the coming Christ, which we get to in verse 6 with the little child that will lead them in literal terms. But he says that in verse 1 that although this stump is dead, there's going to come forth a shoot from it anyways. And a shoot is a living vine, a living branch, a living part. And a branch from its roots, or now he changes it, his roots, shall bear fruit. So now we have the shoot, the root, and the fruit, where once we started with the stump. And this is incredible hope, especially to these people, but should be to us as well. That regardless of what your stump is in your life, whether it's the stump we all share of being born into sin, headed for death, or whether it's the individual stumps, the deadness that we all bear, here we're given hope. There shall come forth a shoot, life from death, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. Now this is an amazing promise, because normally you can't get life from death. In other words, it's saying, I'm going to provide you something from nothing. Life from death. Now we see little evidences of this in the natural world. For example, did you know that there's an African lungfish? I always love the little scientific animal facts. Protopterus annectans. This lungfish can live without food or water for 3 to 5 years. So when its area dries up and there's no food, no water, this fish just goes into kind of suspended hibernation and will come back again when water becomes available, up to 5 years. It's pretty amazing. But still isn't life from death. The record, though, goes to a little tiny a microscopic creature, but it is a multicellular animal, literally qualifies as an animal. It's called a bedelloid rotifer, or wheel animals. And they named that because they look like there's a ring of tiny hairs that circle their mouth. But they live in fresh water in the Arctic permafrost. And they have been known, or they are known through modern research, to have been brought back to quote-unquote life after being frozen solid. The record now is 24,000 years. They have thawed out these things after 24,000 years, and they not only live, they reproduce. It's actually a little scary. But still, they weren't really dead. Life from death, that doesn't happen. something from nothing, that doesn't happen. And you know what especially doesn't happen is what we see in verse 1, where it says, and a branch from his roots shall bear fruit. You know what that means? That means that a person in the future will be a person from his past. As Jesus said in the New Testament, before Abraham was, I am. Because Christ, being both God the Son and God the Father, being the Trinity, both God and human, he's not bound by the limits of time. Christ exists beyond all the damaging effects that time has upon us. So while we sit there and look at ourselves and say, look at this dead, nothing part of me that didn't have to happen, but a year ago or 2 years ago or 20 years ago, I said this or did this or failed to do this, and now I'm stuck. Because nobody can change time, right? But we are promised this anyways. We are promised this anyways. In fact, we are promised in verse 6 that even though we were once a stump, even though we were once people of death, even though we were nothing, just like the Israelites, in verse 6 we are offered something amazing. Symbolically, it says, the wolf shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion and the fattened calf together, and a little child shall lead them. It was a common idiom of the time. The wolf lying down with the lamb is symbolic of peace. But what it's saying is what is being offered by God to the stumps of this text is everything that anybody could possibly want. Absolute peace. Can you imagine this? What this is describing is absolute rest. No fear of anything. Later in the text, it talks about, putting hands in, babies and poisonous snakes. And the bottom line is nothing to fear. Can you imagine living in an existence where you had no fear, no anxiety about anything? And that means you'd have no wants. You would just be fulfilled. Well, what it describes is, of course, paradise. A time before sin. A time before the fall. But that's what's promised. That's what's promised to people that have already blown it. Even Adam and Eve. The people that have killed the tree. The people that literally lost the tree of life. The stump will have a shoot and a branch and fruit. But again, the problem we have every day, even as we come to the time of Christmas, even as we think about this glorious, miraculous birth of Christ, I think all of us still have a tough time making it a reality in our hearts and minds. It's a fun story. We believe it. I think sometimes a lot of that belief comes from a worry about, well, what if I don't believe it? I mean, we certainly don't want to get in trouble and go to hell. But how many of us truly just have absolute confidence in the impossible reality that God himself was this child, and that in this child what is dead will live, what is nothing will become something, that what has already happened in time can change and be something totally different. Well, verse 3 tells us how it is possible to truly, fully believe this. And his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide disputes by what his ears hear. A dead stump will only be a dead stump to you if you look at it only with your eyes and hear about it only with your ears, because it doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It's outside of your experience. When you sit home, you can wish all day for $1 million to appear in your mailbox, and it's probably not going to happen. At least not in our experience. We go by what we know, by what we've seen, by what we've heard. And the bottom line is, we have never seen or never heard of something coming from nothing. We have never seen or never heard of a little child that actually contained very God himself. That's unimaginable. I mean, think about that. Was the baby crying? Did mom changing diapers of the baby? This is God? Did Mary and Joseph argue about who had to get up for the baby in the middle of the night? And did either one of them go, come on, it's God? I mean, it's mind-blowing. It makes no logical sense. If you're going to use your ears and your eyes to figure it out, it's not going to work. Only faith. Only by faith. Could it possibly be true that a man who was tortured and killed without even putting up a fight is our Savior? When everything we have seen and experienced from the beginning of time is might means right, and it is the strongest who win. Nothing about the promises given to us from Isaiah all the way to the child being born makes sense if you're only trying to rationalize it with what you hear and what you see based on your own experience. But you are given a promise. You are given a promise in Isaiah that is fulfilled in that little child that was born in the stable, that from the stump of Jesse, from what was dead and over and ended by their own fault, what was really dead and over and ended by Adam and Eve in the garden, but what was really just more recently ended when the kingdom of Israel became nothing. That from that stump would be life. That from that stump would be fruit. And that history itself would become future. It is unimaginable unless it is accepted by faith. Your stump will live. Don't try to understand it. Just cling to it. Believe it. Know it. You know something that's always, again, I'm a science geek. And some of you may already know this, but back in the 20s, astronomer Edwin Hubble, who the telescope's named after, one of the bigger things he accomplished was measuring the expansion of the universe. And this is a fascinating reality about our universe. And that is that our universe is expanding, first of all. Now that makes sense. If the universe had a start, and you can believe in the creation, and there can, what we call the Big Bang, that it could fit in with the creation account. But if there was a beginning of the universe and an explosion or whatever, it would make sense scientifically that the universe is expanding. If it, kind of started from nothing and expanding out. Makes sense. Here's where it stops making sense. If you have an explosion of something, imagine that, when you were a kid and you lit off fireworks and boom, you have an explosion. The further away you get from the explosion, the slower the particles that are exploding go, right? And eventually they fall to the ground. We've all seen this. You've seen a movie where a bomb blows up and then things go up and then they come down. But Edwin Hubble discovered that the expansion of the universe is getting faster and faster. And it's getting faster and faster in great orders of degrees. How is that possible? It completely goes against the laws of physics, the laws of entropy. Now, there's theories about why it's happening, but nobody's figured it out. But that's not even the weirdest. You know what the weirdest thing is? That if you go anywhere on the planet Earth and take a telescope, so you go to here or to Russia or to the Antarctic or the North Pole, wherever you go on Earth, and you take a telescope and you look at this expanding universe, at every point you stand on the Earth, the universe will appear through the telescope to be expanding away from you. Now think about that for a moment. You're on a ball, and wherever you go on that round ball or that globe, and you look at the universe through some big telescope, it's going away from you. The universe is expanding. It's like you are in the middle of a balloon that's going out in all directions. What does that appear to say? By all appearances, the earth is the center of the universe. And any scientist will tell you, yes, when you look at the universe, it looks like the universe is expanding in all directions away from Earth, which makes it seem like the earth is the center of the universe. Now, that makes no sense. I mean, it really probably isn't the center of the universe. And every scientist says, no, the earth is not the center of the universe. And there's no reason as people of faith to think the earth is the center of the universe. There is nothing, nobody, no faith, no any reason to think that. It makes no sense at all. And while scientists will tell you that's not what it is, they still can't tell you why it looks that way. There's theories. There's lots of theories. None of them proven. Nobody really knows why it looks like from the earth that the universe is expanding away from us at all places. But more than likely it's because our eyes and our ears are way inadequate when it comes to the things of eternal truth, or even the depths of the universe itself. We're Stump people. We come into this Christmas and we know we're Stump people. We are surrounded by Stump people. There is death and misery. People are mean to us. We're mean to other people. There's conflict. There's all those parts of us that we're ashamed of. There's all this deadness. But listen to the words of Isaiah, not with your ears. Look at the words of Isaiah, not with your eyes, but with faith. That even the dead, even the nothing, even that which was done in time far removed, is promised by God to become life, to become something, to restore the paradise that every one of us in our heart so deeply desires. Absolute and perfect peace. In this time of Advent, have faith. In the name of Christ, amen. At this time, I would ask the ushers to please come forward and take up our offering.